Hi, this is Daniel DiTuro. Home baking can be fun and frustrating. Store-bought baked goods are convenient and affordable, but affordability comes at a price. Most are made with a long list of low-cost ingredients, artificial colors and flavors, preservatives, and chemical additives. White icing for homemade cinnamon rolls can have as few as 2 ingredients. The icing for the store-bought cinnamon roll is made using 13 ingredients. Home baking also allows you to use 100% organic ingredients if desired. One of my most watched videos is about making homemade muffins. The base recipe requires only 6 ingredients. Banana muffins require a 7th ingredient, 1 ripe banana. Several years later, I published a video about making homemade chocolate muffins. A viewer commented her muffins turned out dry and unedible. I made a batch of chocolate muffins the same week I read her comment, and they were moist and edible, at least for homemade muffins. That doesn't mean that I haven't had my share of baking failures and mishaps. This is the same ginger snap cookie recipe with 2 different outcomes. Why? Instead of setting the correct temperature of 375 degrees, I had preheated the oven to 400 degrees. I discovered the error after the cookies were in the oven. The 25-degree difference in temperature changed the appearance and texture. Based on my experience, I rank making cookies easier than cakes, pastries, and muffins. While making cookies is relatively simple, bad things do happen. Here are 5 tips to reduce baking mishaps. Tip number 1 is to carefully read the recipe. This is especially important for making light, moist cakes and muffins. But carefully reading the recipe, especially if it's a new recipe, applies to all recipes. 4 things to look for in a recipe are preheat oven temperature, oven rack placement, having all ingredients, and do you have the time to make the recipe? Tip number 2 is to use the right ingredients. Some things to look for are the type of flour and sugar, leavening, flavoring, egg size, and liquid ingredients. Most recipes use a refined wheat flour. In the US, most recipes require all-purpose flour. It goes by other names in different countries, including plain flour. With an emphasis on eating more whole grains, some recipes now call for whole wheat flour. There are also wheat flour substitutes like almond and coconut flour that aren't interchangeable with all-purpose flour. The most common consumer wheat flours include cake flour, all-purpose flour, and pastry flour. Cake flour has the lowest protein, which produces less gluten, and is usually bleached. Bleached cake flour is used for white cakes made without egg yolks. Substituting all-purpose flour produces a denser cake. Unbleached all-purpose flour gives the cake a slight yellow color. Pastry flour is now available in many areas and online. It is usually unbleached and has a protein content in between cake flour and all-purpose flour. Whole wheat pastry flour is available in some areas. Substituting whole wheat pastry flour for pastry flour in a blueberry muffin recipe produces a completely different color, flavor, and texture. White sugar and brown sugar are not 100% interchangeable. Brown sugar contains molasses, while white sugar does not. For leavening, some recipes require baking powder, some baking soda, and others need both. Baking powder and baking soda are not 100% interchangeable. For best results, use the leavening called for in your recipe. Most recipes use large eggs, but eggs vary within a specific size. Here are 2 large eggs, but one yolk is about 50% bigger than the other. Large and extra large eggs are considered interchangeable. If you typically buy small or medium-sized eggs, you'll have to increase the number of eggs. Vanilla extract is a common flavor. Using real or artificial flavors or organic versus non-organic is a personal choice. Liquid ingredients include water, milk, buttermilk, and oil. For best results, use the amount and type of liquids in your recipe. One substitution that produces consistent results is replacing whole milk with 2% or reduced fat milk. Tip number 3 is to carefully measure your ingredients. Is the amount of flour measured before or after sifting? There is a difference. 1 cup sifted flour does not equal 1 cup of flour sifted. Sifting removes lumps and reduces the weight of 1 cup of flour up to 30%. This is important because recipes for U.S. home cooks measure ingredients by volume. Dry ingredients are measured using cups and spoons. Wet ingredients are also measured using cups and spoons. One set of spoons is used to measure dry and wet ingredients. Dry and wet measuring cups are not interchangeable. Measuring cups for dry ingredients are usually sold in a set of 4 sizes, plus you need at least 1 wet measuring cup. Outside of the U.S., dry ingredients are measured by weight and wet ingredients by volume. 1 cup of all-purpose flour weighs between 110 to 140 grams. The difference depends on the brand of flour, how you fill the measuring cup, and whether or not the flour was sifted. When measuring by weight, it doesn't matter if the flour is sifted or unsifted. The weight will vary slightly depending on the scale's accuracy. In this case, 1 cup of all-purpose flour weighs 128 grams. When using the same flour, you can round up to 130 grams per cup. Affordable home kitchen scales are accurate up to plus or minus 1 gram. That's a significant improvement compared to a measuring cup that could be accurate within plus or minus 15 grams. Most U.S. home baking recipes specify measuring packed brown sugar. The reason is simple. The moisture in brown sugar gives it a loose texture with many air pockets. Not packing the brown sugar can reduce the amount of sugar by up to 30%. When packed, 1 cup of brown sugar weighs about the same as 1 cup of granulated sugar. Tip number 4 is to not overmix after adding flour. This is especially important when making cakes, biscuits, and muffins. Mixing develops the gluten in the flour. That's good when making breads. It's bad when making cakes, biscuits, and muffins. Developing the gluten turns light, tender cakes into tough cakes. For tender cakes and muffins, mix in the flour until there are no white streaks or specks. For tender homemade biscuits, do not overmix or knead. Follow the recipe's instructions. You can further reduce gluten development by using a lower protein flour, like replacing all-purpose flour with pastry flour. Tip number 5 is oven temperature and rack location. Having the correct oven temperature is critical regardless of what you're baking. An oven running hot by just 25 degrees Fahrenheit can overbake and dry out cakes, muffins, and cookies. Ovens with digital temperature settings are more accurate than analog temperature ovens. Any oven, digital or analog, can be off by 25 degrees or more. If you are unsure of your oven's temperature accuracy, check it using an oven thermometer placed in the center of your oven. When provided, follow the recipe's instructions for rack placement, and if you need to rotate the baking pans or sheets. Due to differences in oven temperatures, many recipes give a range of cooking times, like 8 to 10 minutes for cookies and 20 to 35 minutes for layer cakes. It just takes a few extra minutes at a higher temperature for cakes and muffins to go from moist and tender to dry and tough. High moisture cakes with long baking times give you a little more margin of error, but not much. When possible, avoid distractions when you are baking. Check recipes after the minimum baking time. If it says bake 15 to 18 minutes, check after 15 minutes. Use a wood toothpick or cake tester. If it does not come out clean, bake another couple of minutes and retest. You can increase baking time, but you cannot undo overbaking. Do not rely on your watch or clock. Use a kitchen or oven timer. Most recipe baking times are based on a preheated oven. In summary, 5 tips for successful baking are: carefully read the recipe, be sure you have all ingredients, measure accurately, avoid overmixing after adding flour, and check after the minimum baking time. Please leave a comment if you have any questions about this video. Thank you for watching, and healthy eating.